Today marks the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and who would have thought 4 decades ago that in 2024 we would be fighting fascism at home? Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Nerd Avengers. Dean, Jen, Waj, Brian, it's great to see everybody. Thank you, everybody who's watching. Kind of a somber day. I feel like somebody's surfing while doing the show. It sounds very beachy. I don't know what that sound is, but it's gone. Okay. It feels somber this anniversary because we have fallen so far. It seems like, Dean, we keep fighting the same fights over and over and over again. And we're going to talk later about this just horrifically egregious decision by Senate Republicans to block contraception, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, let's focus on the fact that apparently we didn't. It feels increasingly like we didn't win the Civil War. We didn't win World War II, and it's getting increasingly fraught. It feels like, Dean.
It does. And, Mary, I sent you an article recently because 2 weeks ago I went to Amsterdam and I went to the Anne Frank house. And first of all, you're just touched by what Anne Frank and her family went through. But then you can't help but broaden out your outlook and see the posters of Nazi Germany and the rise of Hitler and understand that there were people in Germany, like Otto Frank, her father, who took Hitler seriously and left Germany in a short time after he came to power, Hitler in 1933. And unfortunately for them, and tragically for them, Hitler was able to go beyond the boundaries of Germany and then go into the Netherlands and other countries as well and continue with the Holocaust there. But people took it seriously. And I really fear so many of our fellow Americans think we are just saying things politically to get them to vote for Joe Biden without being like, I never called any other Republican president before this or candidate a fascist or an authoritarian. Like, there were authoritarian tendencies to some, but I never said it this way. I never said they were a threat to our democratic republic, that our democratic republic ends as we know it if Donald Trump wins. I don't think I've ever said it about George W. Bush in the past. I certainly didn't say it about Mitt Romney. And that's my concern. And look at I'm sure you saw some interviews with some of the 101-year-old veteran today outside of D-Day who was sitting there and with the memorials behind him and all the graves behind him in Normandy. And they said, "You're a hero." He says, "I'm not a hero." He said, "Those people are heroes. They fought and they died for our freedom," because I had a full life. I have children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And that's my concern, that our fellow Americans literally dismiss us, who aren't following politics closely, dismisses us as being over the top when we're just trying to warn you. History is screaming at you. Go watch the History Channel. The 1930s, it's real. It's happening here. It's happening right in front of us.
It is. And I want to just put up this image. This is so powerful. I'm guessing most Americans don't really know what it signifies. But this is when we stormed the beaches of Normandy, and probably 95% of those young men were slaughtered before they even hit the sand. And that's a conversation for another time. But they knew what they were fighting for. They were fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for America, but for the world. They were fighting the forces that are gaining traction, not just in Europe, but here. So Jen, I just wanted to get your thoughts on today and why it's landing differently.
Yeah. So my thoughts on today, as a Jewish American, I add to the gratitude I have for the folks, including my grandfather and great grandfather, who were fighting in the war. But what was going on, fascism wasn't just an idea and a bunch of speeches in Project 2025. After Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, he put into action the process that became the final solution, Jews in Europe as the scapegoats. And 6 million Jews were slaughtered by Hitler during the Holocaust, and of them, 1.5 million were children. And of course, other people, millions others, lost their lives. But this is a somber day because that felt heroic. We honored those soldiers who came home. War is always terrible, and yet sometimes it has to be fought. And it's somber for me because Donald Trump, who is a leading candidate, and actually your uncle, as it happens, of the Republican Party, is a coward and jealous, it seems like, of the military. This is a guy who said he always wanted to have a Purple Heart, which is reserved for people who either lose limbs or are injured or killed during war. And he is, as you know, a draft dodger who pretended to have bone spurs so he could get out of Vietnam. And he has also shamefully, attacked John McCain, who was a hero, who was in captivity during the Vietnam War. And, I can't believe that this person who would never make a sacrifice for anyone, not even a family member, not even a sacrifice of a penny, let alone his life or his limbs. I just, the contrast and the idea that the Republican Party, which was supposed to be, for law and order, for the troops, they have this leader who is anything but, who is can we mention, been convicted by a jury on 34 felony counts.
Yeah, and worse, he has referred to people like those young men, as 60,000 of whom, as Brian pointed out, lost their lives that day, and many tens of thousands of more American soldiers, hundreds of thousands of soldiers in both theaters of combat. He refers to those who lay down their lives for the cause as suckers and losers. That is your Republican, de facto Republican candidate for the presidency. Brian?
5 years ago, I took the family to Omaha Beach, walked it. It reminded me a lot of if you've ever been to Gettysburg, and that's closer to where we all live. You walk across the meadow where the Confederate soldiers laid down their for an unjust cause or an unjust cause, as they marched across an open field and were slaughtered by Union soldiers sitting, at the bloody angle and taking them out during, the third day, the march at Gettysburg. And so I look at the people who lay down their lives as, for whatever reason, for whatever cause, that takes a measure of courage, sometimes stupidity, that others do not have. So when I think of Gettysburg and I think of D-Day and I think of Donald Trump, these are incongruous thoughts in my head, because at the end of the day, you can't understand unless you walk in those people's shoes. I only got a vague understanding by being there of what it must have been like on D-Day. That first wave, you have no protection. The bombs were dropped in the wrong places. The 101st Airborne Division had landed out of place, out of step, out of touch with being able to cut off the beach. They didn't know whether they were going to live or die. And at the end of the day, establishing a beachhead against Nazism and fascism. And today we can't get people to understand what that is. I blame us in the press. I blame us for not adequately explaining. Dean, you and I talked about this recently, and Mary, you guys talked about it on Tuesday, but we have met the enemy, and he is us.
Yeah.
We are not adequately telling people what the story is. We're not telling people factual information. Final point in all of this is that if you really think that Donald Trump is your savior, you are in a cult, and I can't appeal to you. But I ask you to look to your own family, and what I know that many people who are Donald Trump fans, because I've talked to them, have had family members who died in World War II. and died defending us from Nazi and extremism. Talk to them, talk to your friends, talk to what happened then. Please, if you don't do anything else, don't take my word for it. Don't take our word for it. For the love of God, do. And I'm not the. I don't want to come out like I'm a YouTube expert in the law. Like I watched 2 videos on YouTube and now I know everything. But folks, just go out and expand your horizons. Get out of your information silo. This is a very somber occasion. It's a very serious day. God bless everyone who put their lives on the line. And for the love of God, don't let fascism and Nazism and authoritarianism rule in the United States in 2024. End of rant.
And I think that obviously the fundamental problem is that Americans are horrifically undereducated when it comes to our history and the history of other people. And we don't, in place of that, have, and I'm talking about basic knowledge, as Jen has been pointing out, we don't know our geography, let alone our history. So we're faced with a situation where having an imagination about these things would help too. But you're right, Brian. Nobody can imagine what that was like to be in that first wave of soldiers storming the beach, just as nobody can imagine what it was like to be an enslaved person who'd just been kidnapped from his or her homeland during the Middle Passage. We just can't wrap our heads around it. And between that and the failure of our education system, of politicians who want to undermine, whitewash American history, I should say, it's a terrible combination. I just have a quick question from Dipsy, and then Waj. Did anybody in my family serve? Well, my grandfather didn't serve in World War II. That's a shocker. But my dad actually completed ROTC at Lehigh University. And when he graduated, he was a second lieutenant in the National Guard. This would have been in 1960. He became a second lieutenant. And sorry, Dipsy Doodle, just to clarify. Thank you for the question. So he was a second lieutenant in the National Guard and in New York. And he, my parents were very concerned that he was going to get called up. He did not get called up, but possibly because he was married. He had 2 very young children. But if he had been, he would have gone. And that I know. So thank you for the question. Waj?
So 80 years ago, young men, oftentimes against their will, were led to their slaughter, landing on that beach, fighting against Nazis, fighting against the spread of fascism all across Europe. Those kids, I call them kids because most of them were kids, had no chance. They landed and they were mowed down. And yet they still, as Brian said, kept moving forward. And they eventually established that beachhead, and they eventually secured victory at a great cost. You fast forward 80 years, and instead of laying down our lives against fascism and Nazis, we have one political party that is dining with Nazis. And you say, Waj, sometimes you're hysterical. Don't be reactionary. What are you talking about? Donald, your uncle. Mary.
Can we just call him Donald? Because it's like
Donald, the guy.
It feels violent to refer to him as my uncle.
Apologies, I started that trend.
Yeah, you did. And I'm aware.
Apologies. I think it was a Jen reverb. She said it and came back in my head. But you're there are people, right? Here you are talking about the brave sacrifice and victory, and of eventual victory at great cost. People need to understand the magnitude of the casualties, right? Like just bodies torn to shred, young boys. That's what they gave up to fight to keep Nazism at bay. And now you fast forward 80 years, and the leader of the Republican Party, one of the 2 major political parties, Donald, is voluntarily dining with Nick Fuentes, who is a Holocaust denier, one of the leading anti-Semites, and who is a white supremacist. And when he has an opportunity to get in front of the world and hit a softball down the middle and condemn the KKK, Nazis, and white supremacists who were chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," he says what? Very fine people on both sides. And when we have been warning I think on the Mary Trump Avengers, and I have been warning for several years that white nationalist, Nazi, and KKK talking points will go mainstream by 2024, folks. This is what we're talking about. And if you want to know your history, there's a really good book that came out about a month ago. It's called The Takeover by Timothy Ryback, Hitler's Final Days in Power. And what it says, Mary, is, and this is the part for all of us, is how so many institutions and individuals were complicit in Hitler and Nazis coming to power. They thought they'd be okay. They thought they'd be safe. They played it neutral, Mary. They said, hey, it's just business as usual. And without their complicity, Hitler would not have been allowed to come to power. And so here we are, 2024. If history rhymes and repeats, we are seeing it with our own eyes, Mary. We are literally seeing the rise of Nazis, KKK, white supremacists, to the point where they're openly protesting. Armed Nazis are protesting all across America, marching. When I was growing up, folks, and this is for the Gen Z watching, Indiana Jones used to punch Nazis. Everyone used to clap. Now, literally, we're like, punch a Nazi. Literally, both sides would agree. Like, no Republican would say, how dare you punch a Nazi? Everyone's like, yep, Nazi, bad. Now we're like, it's part, should we not talk about it? And just to, what people don't know is the leadership of Texas Republicans, the Texas Republican Party. Last year, they were given a pledge. They were invited to sign a pledge. Will you not associate with Holocaust deniers and anti-Semites? Softball down the middle. Do not associate with Holocaust deniers and anti-Semites. The leadership of the Texas GOP said, nah, this is where we are. This is the reality. This is the threat we're facing. And I need everyone to wake up to it. And if you think complicity will keep you safe, we give you the rise of Nazis in Germany, and no one's asking you to sacrifice your body. No one's asking you to sacrifice your life. No one's asking you to storm the beaches of Normandy like those young men. At the very least, you can speak up. That's the very least we can.
At the very least, Dean.
And quick thing to the point of Raj is that because of the sacrifice of those people on D-Day and over 400,000 Americans in World War II who fought, we can defeat fascism by not landing on a beach and risking our lives, but simply voting.
Yeah.
It's because of that sacrifice we have an opportunity to defeat fascism on our soil. And the one last thing, and we've all talked about the threat. Again, one of the lessons from, and I wrote about it when I went to the Anne Frank house a couple of weeks ago, was when you read about the history, the first people Hitler put in jail, immediately the concentration camps were political opponents, socialists, liberals, German liberals. Later, the Holocaust took shape over time. And Donald Trump, at his rally after rally, he's saying something the corporate media is missing. He's saying, I'm going to liberate America from the villains and scoundrels once and for all. And before that, who are the villains and scoundrels? He says the press, it's rhinos, it's the political class. He is telling us at rally after rally what he's going to do to all of us. He's going to liberate, whatever liberate means. And if he wins, he'll believe he has a mandate to liberate this country from us. We've never heard a leading politician in any party say they're going to liberate America from fellow Americans but him. So that's why today, D-Day, on this moment, is a moment to reflect on that. History is yelling at us. It's begging us to take notice about what's going on.
Yeah, and to a point Waj made earlier, we are basically sounding the alarm based on what's actually happening. The reason it seems some people may interpret it as being over the top and melodramatic and hyperbolic is because on the right, they are being over the top, melodramatic and hyperbolic about the things they're lying about. So it's a very tricky problem. Unfortunately, they do seem to be better at checkmating us with rhetoric that for various reasons just is more effective in a lot of cases. Jen Rubin, as you can imagine, we're talking about D-Day. So we're, just sort of pondering the travesty that what we fought for 80 years ago, we're now fighting for here, for fighting against, I should say, and for. And it looks like it's a tie at the moment.
Well, I apologize for being late. I was sort of caught up in the D-Day ceremony. It never fails to move me to tears, actually. And I was thinking today as I was watching it, can you even imagine Donald Trump doing this? This was the guy
he didn't. He had a chance, and he didn't.
Right. The rain, he didn't want to go to Bellawood because it was going to mess up his hair. Yeah. Every value that Biden speaks about, Trump is incapable of showing. He's incapable of showing appreciation for the honored dead. He's incapable of understanding that alliances aren't out to steal our pocket, but are for our mutual defense. He's incapable of understanding that democracies are better than totalitarian regimes. He just can't do this. And I'm actually working on a piece for Sunday, which says the issue is not age. Trump could be 20, he could be 90. Biden could be 20, he could be 90. But the capacity to be president is the ability to absorb information, to put your own ego aside, to make good decisions and hire good people. That's what good leadership is. Does anyone legitimately think Trump can do that? By his own admission, he keeps hiring people who are disloyal, who are dumb, who are incompetent, because he had to fire all of them. By his own admission, this is all about him. Look what he has done with the Wall Street Journal journalist, who he says, well, he'll get out for me. In other words, that this is all about him getting elected, that if he does have some sway, that he's not pushing Putin to do this now. This is all about getting him elected, as opposed to defending an American who is unjustly held. Trump just cannot do these things. And we can say he's senile, he has dementia, he has, mental deterioration, all true. But frankly, he wasn't capable of doing any of these things 50 years ago because he doesn't have the capacity, the character to do what presidents do. Presidents are not about how fast they move or whether they move stiffly or more relaxed. This is not Jeopardy. This is not stand-up comedians. This is not even about speechifying. We've had great presidents who were good speech makers and great presidents who were not great speech makers. Does anyone remember what Harry Truman said, really ever? But he was a very good president. And we've had very good presidents who have also been good speech makers. And we've had presidents who spoke beautifully, but were idiots. So the things that people obsess about really literally have nothing to do with the presidency. And I think this is why it happens. Political reporters don't know anything about running things. They're not executives. They've never been executives. They've never hired people. They've never run organizations. We do better to have business people, frankly, covering the White House, because at least they understand what the concept of executive leadership is, that it's about who you hire. It's about how you process information. It's about understanding and communicating a message. Political reporters, it's all surface. It's all, how do you look? How do you sound? Are you eloquent? Are you, did you stumble? That has nothing to do with being president. And it's one of the reasons that the media is so out to lunch. They are so focused on superficial things that have nothing to do with our democracy, with leadership, with the presidency, that we get, face plants like the Wall Street Journal. We get face plants like every time they, run another one of these hack stories. So if nothing else, I would implore people, think about what it was to have FDR in office as opposed to Charles Lindbergh in office. Think about what it was to have, a Eisenhower running the military rather than one of the clowns that Trump put in office or that he's planning on putting in office. Just think about the difference in character and capability. And, I hope people get some kind of mental, emotional, intellectual reset, but I have my doubts. And by the way, I'm going to plug a book that's not mine, that I didn't that is called The Information War, How to Win the Information War. It's by a guy who studies a German who, he was actually born in England, but he lived in Germany and then he went back. And he came up with a methodology for trying to disrupt Nazi propaganda. He said, arguments don't matter. Information doesn't matter. You're not going to win them with facts and with arguments. What he did was he mocked the Nazis hysterically with details, with facts, and he got them to tune into a show that became like a cult following in Germany that ridiculed these people, that showed them to be selfish, that showed them to be jerks, that showed them to be complete incompetent boobs. And he got like 1 million listeners in Germany. And I sometimes think, we have to rethink how we talk to people, because his big point in the book, and I totally agree with it, is that communication in this political space is not about the argument. It's about the sense of belonging. It's about the sense of pride. It's about the high these people get from being associated with Donald. And if you disrupt them, if you make that seem shameful, or Trump is weak, or Trump is laughable, or Trump is corrupt, you're better than he is. You didn't go to jail. I got an irate email from a reader who said, "What are you saying? Just because he went to jail or he was convicted, he's a loser?"
Well, yes.
Yes, that would be a yes.
By definition.
Bingo.
Just like Steve Bannon. Just like Steve Bannon. Sorry.
All
Go to prison.
are crooks and losers.
Yes. Jen, who wrote the book?
A individual by the name of Peter Pomerantsev, Pomerantsev, and I'm about halfway through, and it's absolutely gripping.
Okay. We'll put that the title in the link. Sorry, in the show description, so everybody can check. I'm going to check it out. I know, Dean, you have to go, so I'm going to let you scoop Waj and tell us the rare bit of good news that we just received. You're muted.
Oh, Dean, unmute
Let me
yourself.
unmute. There we go. So sorry, Waj, because Waj put it in the chat. But this just in, and I was waiting for this. Steve Bannon went to court today because he lost his appeal at the U.S. Court of Appeals. He was sentenced to remind everyone to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress because he didn't comply with the January 6th subpoena, and he invoked, I believe, executive privilege, and Trump didn't even back him up, and he claimed this idea he relied on his attorney, and they didn't buy any of that. So the judge just said he has to report to jail on July 1st. Now, of course, I'm sure he'll try to do some immediate appeal, but the effective thing is Steve Bannon for 4 months will be out of the messaging game. I'm hoping there's no podcast privileges in prison, and I'm pretty sure there won't be. There better not be podcast privileges in prison. So he won't be able to help.
Well, we may feel differently about that after
July,
the election.
August, September, October. And of course, he was waiting for Donald, somebody's uncle, I'm not going to say who, to get into office so he could appeal, he could get a pardon. And he's not getting a second pardon. But by the way, he also has his trial date come up here in New York for the fraud case for defrauding Trumpers. And that's maybe they bring him out of jail for that, but he'll be in a courtroom every day. So that's that. But it's great seeing everyone.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
For my radio show. Jen, two Jens, a Waj, a Brian, and Mary. Nice seeing you all. Look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. Thanks, Dean. Okay, so the other thing, I definitely want to tie this into the fact that the rule of law seems to be losing its mind. But I think the really big news, it's all big news, but the fact that 38 Republicans voted against a national protection for contraception. I mean, they really do want us back in the 1860. There's literally no other way to because watch, this is another domino. It does not end here. Clarence Thomas told us last year that he's gunning for the right to privacy. And what does that mean?
We talked about this on Mary Trump's Nerd Avengers, specifically after Dobbs, and we talked about what will this foreshadow. And I want to, I'm critical of Democrats, but like I've always told our loyal viewers that I also praise them when they do good. I'm only critical because I want people to do better. So well done, Democrats. This was a very smart, strategic move. They knew that Republicans would be cornered. And on this particular issue, what we have seen, Mary, is that Republicans now are tethered to the extremities of their base. They know this is a losing issue, but if they pivot, even on, say, on gun control, they're stuck. And so Democrats knew didn't have the votes. So then if you're watching right now, you're like, okay, if Democrats knew they didn't have the votes, why'd they bring it up? Because now they have it on record. They have the votes on record that majority of Republicans in this country will not sign on to protection of the right to use contraceptives. And like you said, Mary, the right to privacy. And so we knew from the Supreme Court dissents, from the concurrences, and we knew from the mouths of Republicans after Dobbs, after they came for the right to abortion, they openly said, next up, right to contraceptives, right to abortion pills, right to IVF. That was the Alabama case. Let's not forget it. Arizona Supreme Court took us back to the 19th century. And now they're stuck, Mary. Now it's like anyone who comes up to them and says, why did you vote against that? And now what the Republicans are saying, this was unnecessary, this was overreach. But meanwhile, if I'm the Democrats, I'm like, it's not overreach. You all said that Roe was protected and Planned Parenthood was protected, and you went against that. So we just want to make sure that Americans have rights. Why wouldn't you vote to protect a woman's right to contraceptives? Oh, it's just leave it up to the states. Leave what up to the states? The right to take away to take away the right to contraceptives? And then they just like melt. So it's one of those amazing strategic chess moves that I think was well done to Democrats. And now, this is the test. From here until the election, will you run on this every single day? If I was a Democrat, I would remind voters every single day about this issue and Trump's criminality.
Well, if they asked me about congestion pricing, I would change the topic.
Yeah, I would say, did you know that they didn't vote for a woman to have a right to contraceptives in the year 2024? It's
incredible. And Brian, you're on deck, but I will go to Allie first because she just got here. Hey, Allie.
Hey, guys.
This isn't going to bother anybody in Gen Z or the millennials, right? Nobody's going to care that their birth control and their IUDs are going to be outlawed, right?
Definitely not. No. I mean, it just, to me, it makes no sense, like, why this is now another issue that they're trying to die on, like the hill they're trying to die on.
Yeah.
It's like we're at this point where our politics is so dumb. This is what we're talking about, is the right to contraception, which should just be an inalienable right. Like, hello. So
it's stunning.
It's stunning. I mean, there's truly no reason not to pass that legislation, and other than the fact that they want to, it's all part of their major game plan, which is to stop women from being promiscuous in their eyes. And it all stems back from Christianity, evangelical Christianity. And because other than that, there really is no factual or scientific basis to not instituting the right to contraception. So, and like I said before in another show, less contraception equals more abortions. And so that too is just like,
yep.
You know, what is your game plan? What is your hope here? So, I think it's disturbing that every man in the Senate voted against this, and the only every Republican man in the Senate.
Yep.
And only to cross party lines were women. So, I mean, it's just, this is the point where we're at. And I do think Democrats should continue to talk about it, because again, this is another digestible issue that people my age, Gen Z, women, especially young women, understand very clearly. So, but my hope is that people don't get, like, sometimes when you talk about things that seem so outlandish, like, oh, Republicans didn't vote for this, like, but it hasn't like conceptualized in our own lives yet.
Right.
Then people don't really understand what's at stake, you know, because my life hasn't changed. Same with people that live in blue states that still have access to abortion. My life hasn't necessarily changed, but there are people in red states who are feeling that effect. So I think it's up to us to message correctly to younger voters, and I'm definitely going to do that. So
yeah, and tell stories, which is again something Democrats aren't great at. And you know, my daughter was in college still when the Dobbs decision was overturned, and even though we're in a very blue state and she has no plans to go anywhere, a lot of her friends are like, wait a minute, I can't go to grad school in the state, or I can't move with my boyfriend or girlfriend if they're moving to a state that now has no access. And Brian, I think we're missing something if we don't talk about how violent this is. This feels violent to me.
Well, it is, but look, we're kind of missing the point here to Allie, what she was saying, watch what you were saying earlier, and something to say to Jen I want, but that's another point. But look, this all makes a lot of sense. The rich will always have access to birth control and to abortions.
But how does it make sense electorally?
Well, here's how it makes sense to them.
Right.
I'm not saying electorally, I'm saying to them. Put yourself in their mindset. It's the rich will get what they want. And what they want to do, if you combine the fact that you can't have abortion and you can't have contraception, that means you want to breed a lot of poor people. At the same time, you are disallowing immigrants from coming to this country. So who's going to replace the poor labor in the workforce? Those poor people that you are forcing to breed. They are breeding slaves. That's what this boils down to. That's what you have to make people know. This is a long-term goal. I know it sounds kind of nuts, but look, just do the math. If you can't get contraception, if you can't get abortion, you're going to have a lot of poor people having kids. If you disallow immigrants from coming to this country, who's going to take up the back-breaking labor? The poor that you forced to breed.
And that's Brian, I want you to keep going, but you don't provide universal childcare or pre-K or any support for pregnant women. I mean, if we look at the infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates for women of color in this country, it is criminal and intentional, Brian. Yes,
it is. It's criminal and it's intentional. And to Jen's point, look, the press is a part of the problem. It's not that, during the Nixon administration, there were a couple of reporters, I think it was maybe even Woodward and Bernstein, said, hey, don't send me your political reporters down here. Send the crime beat reporters because they know what's going on. They can cover the crime. She's saying send the business reporters. Jen, I would just like them to send reporters. The problem is we don't have reporters. What we have are paid shills and hacks who got out of school, who have never done the job, who go there. God bless, I would love to just have a decent reporter with some education and background and experience. If we could get someone who understands business, and I've run businesses, that would be great. But let's start with the basics. I think you're getting ahead of the game.
It's not that hard. Look at ProPublica. You can find people. You just have to have the mindset. And I think
pay them.
The reporters, yes, they're bad, but the real problem is the editors.
Managers.
Because the editors tell them to go out and do these stupid stories. How do you think those 2 Wall Street Journals people got sent on this stupid ass story that
you're not going far enough. It's not the middle management who assigned them the stories. It's the people with the background in advertising who run the business, who tell the middle managers what we need to make money. So then they send the reporters out. You go along to get along. And there is a huge, we used to call them sacred cows. You don't want to cover this because it's a sacred cow. Today, everything is through that lens of money. That's the sacred cow. Make the money. So you've got a guy at the top of the food chain who's never been a reporter, who has no idea what editorial content is, who has no idea what journalism is, telling a middle manager who's lucky to be off the streets, trying to feed his kids and his wife, pay the rent, and knows he's out on his butt if he doesn't do it, assigned to a reporter who has no experience reporting what it is they've got to go cover.
Brian, I hate to cut you off because I haven't heard this before about journalism, but I'm just teasing you. No, it is.
But the last thought is, and I know my last thought, but what Allie's talking about as far as what we have to do is make people who are younger voters aware of what's going on behind the scenes.
I have a plan. Let me jump in.
Tell them their birth control is being taken away.
Well, no. You got it. So here's, guys. I have this thing. Remember, so if I were in charge of making ads for the Democratic Party or for candidates, I would want to make sure that we address conceptually. I'll tell you what the ad is. They're trying to lull us into a sense of complacency by saying, oh no, on the one hand, they're saying, we're taking away your birth control. And then people are saying, no, we're not going to do that. We just didn't want to pass this law. And they're calling us crazy. So you need a contrast ad that begins, remember in 2015, when we warned you if Donald Trump was elected, the Supreme Court was going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And then we show talking head after talking head after talking head saying they're crazy, that will never happen, that will never happen, that will never happen. Boom, it happened. And then we do the contrast of saying now we're telling you they're going to take away your birth control. Who do you believe? And then they deny it. Who do you believe, them or us? Vote like your life depends on it or something like that. We've got to make sure that people don't think we're crazy. We've got a really good batting average here. They're telling us what they're going to do. And then we say, guys, they're going to do that. They're like, these fucking crazy harpy women. What do they know? Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Well, yeah. And
Jen's right.
yeah. When are we going to start
Yes, I'm a harpy
believing
man,
them?
I
You know,
agree with
this is the same party that takes credit for infrastructure bills, things that actually help people, that they voted against. So people need to stop like believing what they're saying and look at what they're doing, basically. So I'd like to move on, but if anybody has anything else to say quickly about this. Okay.
One
Yep.
very quick thing. Jen Rubin and I briefly discussed in the chat. Another reason why these Republicans want to push forward with birth control, and this is very key, is because they want to replenish what they see as the white race being replaced by Black people, Muslims, and Latinos. And this is the pronatalism, white nationalist natalism of Elon Musk and others who are so obsessed with the falling birth rate. And so they want to control women, but they also want women to reproduce white babies. And what will happen instead, as everyone has mentioned, you're going to get a lot more Black babies, brown babies, and a lot more violence.
Yeah. And, you know, I think one of the strategic concerns here is that, as true as that is, that's the kind of thing that's going to strike people as being totally hyperbolic and alarmist and unrealistic, even though it's 100% true. So I think we need to start with, hey guys, millennials, Gen Z, you have fewer rights than I did when I was your age. Hey guys, you now are going to have no control over your family planning unless you never, ever want to have sex again. Like, seriously, like it's that basic. And then the rest, you know, the knock-on effects, or I should call them their strategic maneuvering here, is exactly what Waj and Jen are talking about. So we'll get there, but let's build with the simple, basic fact of, hey, you don't have any rights and you are going to have absolutely no control over your reproductive health, whether it's abortion or taking a pill. I mean, it's just absolutely insanity, which leads me to today's Supreme Court decisions. There were 3, 2 of them weren't particularly groundbreaking. Or the reason we know that they weren't important is because the decisions were unanimous. So for those of you out there who think that unanimous decisions means that the court is somehow functioning properly, no. The supermajority is still hopelessly corrupt and political, but every once in a while, a clock, well, no, actually twice a day, a broken clock is right. We also learned that Samuel Alito actually does know how to recuse. He recused in an insurance bankruptcy case. So he is purposely and belligerently deciding to stay on the January 6 cases and the presidential immunity cases. Actually, Kyle, can you put up the picture of me waiting for the immunity decision? Because I want people to see the toll that it's taken. And this image, unless you don't have it, in which case, don't. But see, that's me waiting. But you know, that's also me waiting for major news outlets to call for Donald to drop out of the race. Okay, so it's getting very tiring, I have to say. I think we're all going to start looking like that soon. Anyway, Jen, did you want to talk about the third decision that came down today, or should we move on?
Just very quickly, there was one good decision today, and it was surprising. It involved an Indian tribe that was suing because although they were given the rights to take over health service for the tribe, they didn't get the funding necessary to support that. And now the Indian Health Service, which is part of the federal government, has to provide the back end kind of support so that they can, they can take it over with, the back office support to do things like billing it, et cetera. I think it's really good because it has to do with tribal autonomy. I worked, as you all know, on an Indian reservation one summer and during law school, and always happy to see this because I think Native American rights are important, and they're not just, I see a lot of this on the East Coast. People make these statements like at universities, the first thing whenever they give a speech is they acknowledge that we are giving a speech on Native American land, but they're not really actually interested in giving it back. So I'm really interested in when tribes, stand up for their rights and get the support that they deserve given the history in this country.
Yeah, great. Another rare bit of good news. And the quote unquote liberals on the court were joined by Roberts and not surprisingly Gorsuch. The one area in which he seems to get things right is when it comes to Native Americans. I'm not sure what that's about, but we'll take the win. Okay, so I have a question. Can somebody please explain to me, like I'm an idiot, why Benjamin Netanyahu has been invited to speak to Congress, not just by the Republicans, Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell, because of course they would invite him, but Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. I don't know if you saw this, but David Rothkopf, our friend, had to post an article in the Daily Beast, and I just want to read briefly from it. Multiple news sites report that the Netanyahu government, via its Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, ran a multi-million-dollar AI-powered disinformation campaign designed to generate support for their Gaza war among U.S. elected officials and the U.S. general public, particularly ones who are Black and Democrats. Okay, so does anybody have Jen Rubin? Can you explain this to me?
Yeah. First of all, they're so stupid, the Republicans. They invited Netanyahu on a Jewish holiday that he can't attend. So it just shows you how sincere, how much they love the Jewish
sincere,
people.
The love for Israel and Jews.
Jen, was it Shavuot?
Yes. The giving of the 10 Commandments. How appropriate that when it's law giving time, it's like, forget it. We don't recognize any of that law giving. 10 Commandments, Constitution, forget it.
Rule of law.
Yeah, rule of law. So what happened here is obviously the Republicans are trying to make this point that we love war. We love the Israelis. It's those terrible Democrats who have abandoned Israel. And this is not for the benefit of any Jews, because Jews are overwhelmingly going to vote Democratic like they do all the time. This is to make their Christian white evangelical base feel better because they love Israel, not because they love the Jews. They don't even know that it's Shavuos. They love them because this is the place where the, second coming, they're all going to rise up from the, whatever it is, Mount of Olives or whatever. Don't read that part of the
rapture. That's the rapture.
There you go. I'm a little weak on the New Testament. We just do the old. So
book one, we ended up with book 2.
Republicans don't do either. So there you go.
Yes, exactly. Right. Oh, by the way, was that the best when Trump was asked in that interview about what he prays, and he literally couldn't answer the question. Like, what do you mean praying? And then he's talking about his support with evangelicals.
Did he get struck by lightning?
It was hysterical. I mean, that was like supposed to be a softball. I would love for someone in the debate to ask him that question. When was the last time you prayed? Corinthians 2.
To himself? Yeah, right.
Exactly.
2 Corinthians walk into a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So back up a minute. So what happened here? So they invited him. So the question for Chuck Schumer and for Yaki Jeffries was, do we go
How are
along
you,
with it
Mary?
because we don't want to be painted as anti, Israel, or do we say no, thank you? And here is the dilemma. We talked about this actually the last time I think I joined you, which is, how do you show support for a country but not for its leader? And I think they could have said something along the lines like, you can invite whoever you like, we'll be there, or we won't be there, without kind of signing on to it. But this is one of these political maneuvers that, they felt like, all right, fine, we'll go along. Now, what's going to be interesting to see is who shows up. How many people don't show up? And by the way, when it's time for one of those silent walkouts, this would be a good time for, those graduations.
Yep.
This would be a good time for his silent walkout when he is saying something that is so horrifically false or objectionable, to our values. By the way, I don't know when he's actually going to come because they have to find a new date. So maybe if Chuck Schumer was really smart, he went along knowing that this was a date that he could not accept. That would have been smart. Smart. That's what we call in Yiddish seichel. Smart, common sense.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, sometimes Schumer surprises me by doing the right thing, and then so often
By the way, he has been pretty smart of late. The other thing that Republicans, or the Democrats rather, are thanking him for is having brought that immigration bill back to the floor before Biden's latest announcement. Whatever you like, whatever you don't like, making them once again vote against a strong immigration bill. You had members of Congress, sitting Democrats who are in tough seats, in border seats, who said, thank you, White House. So in the same sense that Water said, good work, Mr. Schumer, that's good work. Making Republicans vote against things that we know.
Absolutely. He needs to get off his ass about the Supreme Court, though. Ali, we have this other situation in which not inviting Netanyahu and making a point of it. And as Jen just said, making it clear what the difference between supporting Israel and not supporting leadership is. Millennials and Gen Z are very passionate about this issue, and they understand the difference between those two things. And it just feels like another slap in the face to those of us. And just a self-own, like why let Republicans set the tone for anything and follow them?
Yeah. It feels like we're letting them set the narrative again on this issue, which they've been doing, which is conflating Netanyahu and the Israeli people and the Jewish people. And so it's just making Democrats as a whole seem anti-Jewish or anti-Israel. And that's the verbatim verbiage that they're using in all of their articles and all their news broadcasts, which is anti-Israel. And so and I think we're losing this messaging war by a lot. And so, again, it's like we're letting Mitch McConnell run the show. So that's really frustrating on my end. I also wanted to add one other point, which is that Republicans, like you guys said, are not big fans of the Jewish faith or the Jewish people. They don't know much about anything. But in their minds, they're using it as a cover to show that they're not opposed to all other religions. Like Christianity obviously dominates the Republican Party, and we all know this. And they've been accused of being, wanting America to be a Christian nation. And I think this is just another way they can say, no, we don't. Look, we support Israel. We support Netanyahu. We support the Jewish people. And it's
except when it comes to abortion, which Jews do not agree with.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, the white evangelical takeover of this party should shock everybody to their core. And I'll get to you quickly, Waj. But first, I just want to say that they're doing the same thing by conflating Donald with America. And it's very dangerous. We're seeing this rhetoric already gaining traction on the right. To be against him is to be against America. We need to stay on top of all of this stuff. Waj, go ahead.
I think this is a very good pivot moment for Biden and many Democrats, precisely for what we've all been saying is attack Netanyahu, one of the most hated politicians in the world right now, And he said in Time magazine, the small little quote that came out a few days ago where President Biden said, I think Netanyahu's only in it for himself. Attack Netanyahu, separate Netanyahu from the country of Israel, the people of Israel. Increasingly say, I think he's only in this war for himself. It gives you some space. Have surrogates come out, like Senator Sanders, who's publicly criticized this invite, attack Netanyahu. And also, I would say, a wonderful opportunity, Mary, which has been a missed opportunity for both the corporate mainstream press and Democrats. Remind every American that Donald Trump and GOP are aligned with anti-Semites, promote anti-Semitic conspiracies, and do not care about Jews. This has been a failed opportunity. There is quote after quote after quote, volumes now. If I were Democrats, I would go on in the offensive, attack Trump and Republicans and anti-Semites, tell them they don't care about Jews at all, they're cynical, and then attack Benjamin Netanyahu. And it gives Biden and Democrats a little bit of space, which they need, by the way, and Ali knows this, with the young voters, especially the majority voters, to kind of step away here a little bit from this war and maybe regain some voters and attack Republicans. I hope they take the opportunity.
Listen, I think part of it is just grappling with the idea that somebody can sit down with, promote, and mimic Nazis, and that's not enough, to make them persona non grata. Anyway, catch up, guys. Catch up. This is where we are. Okay. In other news, this is Max Dow, and this was announced by the Vermont State of Colleges, or catledges, as they say, with a resounding purr of approval from the faculty. The Board of Trustees of the Vermont State Catledges has bestowed upon Max Dow the prestigious title of Doctor of Literature, complete with all the catnip perks, scratching post privileges, and litter box responsibilities that come with it. I don't know about you guys, but it took me 6 years working 70-hour weeks, teaching, seeing patients. I had to do a year-long internship at a state mental hospital. I had to write a dissertation. But Max, the cat, has 4 legs and a tail. But let's face it, he's freaking adorable. So good for you, Dr. Max Dow. I love that story. I mean, it's just, it reminds me that people can still have fun and do sweet, silly things in the midst of all the horrors. We can take Max's picture down.
Also,
Can I just jump in and say, though, I know you worked really hard. I only had to work, for 3 years for my JD, but Ponzu is our dog is such a rule breaker that I think he already has his Juris Doctorate.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. The punning is out of control.
And it is a nice reminder that a piece of paper does not make you smart.
This PhD cat also mastered in meow.
Oh my goodness. Okay, guys, before this gets out of control, I just want to remind everybody that
I blame Jen.
Don't we all? Okay, so yesterday, another episode of A Muslim and a Jew dropped with special guest, our fellow Nerd Avenger, Dino Badala. And every morning at 8 o'clock at Mary Trump Media on this very channel, we have Morning Jen with Jen Taub. It's fabulous. It's a great way to start your day with a cup of coffee. As mentioned, we're building. We're going to have new content every week. Short videos, interview programs, all sorts of things are in the works. So please check everything out. Check all the new stuff out. That's A Muslim and a Jew every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and Morning Jen every day, Monday through Friday. We give her weekends off, at least for the time being, at 8 a.m. Eastern. And like I said, we will be here every Tuesday and Thursday. Actually, I didn't say that. I'm saying it now. We'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 noon Eastern for the Nerd Avengers. And as things ramp up, we may be adding more episodes of the Nerd Avengers to keep up with the craziness, because we got to 1/3 of the things I wanted to cover today. Because, we got to get that T-shirt for Jen Rubin. The fire hose of fuckery continues. So that is it for today. Thank you all
Is that a porno tape?
so much. Oh my God. Okay, let's. That's my out. So thank you, Waj, Jen Taub, Jen Rubin, Brian, Ali, Dean Obadala, for being here today, and to all of you for your fabulous comments and just for subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do now. That way you'll get alerted every time new shows drop. We so appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern here, and Monday morning at 8 a.m. for Morning Jen. And in the meantime, please stay safe.
And tomorrow, Morning Jen.
Oh, sorry. I forgot. I thought it was Friday. It's been a very long week. Tomorrow, Morning Jen. Next Tuesday for the nerds. And in the meantime, please stay safe and be kind.